Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's Ag Forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. As we get things started, I'm only going to produce one video today, and the reason why is I'm actually on a family vacation this week. We love to celebrate the week of the 4th of July with our family, and I'm right up here in northern Wisconsin, and the rain that's going to be coming through here is about ready to shut down my internet connectivity here for the remainder of the day. And as you see the rain that's coming across, it's really hitting some extremely dry fields. And while this is going to put a bit of a damper on my day, I just got to show you something great. It's been a good fishing week. That's my dad right there, and this is my good friend Will. And Will landed this 40-inch northern pike. We think it weighed about 10 pounds. Incredible fish here. Now, what's interesting is the weather pattern that's moving in right now is breaking down what we saw through much of the weekend. And that was this ring of fire pattern. There was a big high-pressure cell that moved into parts of the Midwest and the Ohio Valley. And you notice that all around it, storms fired. So along the Gulf Coast, through Texas and High Plains, getting back here into the northern plains of the United States, and just run the periphery of that high-pressure cell. And this did return some rain to some very dry fields that are in parts of the Dakotas. And in this forecast, there is more to come for that region. And why it's so important is, when we just look back over the time period of June 1st through July the 5th, this is an area that is almost near record dryness. In fact, a few of the climate reporting districts here in this part of South Dakota and right here in Montana are having their driest such time period on record. Meanwhile, you get to the south of there, the southern plains, working through a big section here, the Ohio Valley, parts of the Midwest, and then the southeast. Things have been much wetter. Now, to put this into context, I would like to show you the net effect of what happened at the end of June and the beginning of July with that ridge that was over the western United States. So we're looking here at height anomalies, and the jet stream was coming in like this, and it ran up over that very large ridge that then dipped back down here over the Great Lakes states. Now, at times, this ridge was several standard deviations above the average mean height of the atmosphere. And I believe that the net effect of that ridge was to perturb the atmosphere and get it stuck into establishing some sort of West Coast Four Corners ridging event that we're probably going to be dealing with throughout much of the month of July. And at the end of this forecast video, I will show you the new long-range forecast, and that's where this will come into play. But when I show you the response in temperatures that gave us this ridge, you won't be surprised to see this, that from June 1st through July the 5th, there are many of our climate reporting districts in the west and in the northern plains that are having not just a top 5, but a top 1 or 2 hottest time periods on record. Meanwhile, from the southern plains to the Carolina coast, we've seen temperatures here at times near normal to cooler than normal. We're going to talk about changes we expect in this pattern, not necessarily in the near term, but as we work our way toward the longer term forecast here. Now, here's another piece to this puzzle I'm trying to really stitch together here, and that is I've talked a lot about the presence of this Bermuda high. So throughout June and early July, we've had a very strong high pressure cell sitting in this area, and a question I have is if that is going to persist and stay in place there, because one of the effects of that high pressure cell right now is that it has helped steer what is now Tropical Storm Elsa right into this area. Passed over Cuba last night. If we go take a look at some of the live radar data, let's get this playing here. You will see there it is early this morning. So there's kind of the edge of our radar here. It went over Key West early this morning. Saw some good deep convection in this early this morning, which meant that it had some life in it and it was strengthening at times. But the National Hurricane Center expects this to stay at tropical storm strength as it nears the west coast of Florida. And that is actually a rather rare place for tropical cyclones to make landfall. But that is where we're expecting it to go. So the 11 a.m. Eastern Time update kept Elsa at tropical storm strength, took it right here through this part of Florida and then along the kind of the southeast coast here of Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, before racing here up the east coast and eventually toward like Nova Scotia. So when you think about this, let's talk winds first. We could see wind gusts approaching 80 miles an hour as it comes on shore. But throughout much of this area, I'm expecting wind gusts to be generally less than about 50 miles an hour. I believe the models have overdone the winds in certain situations here. I think it's going to be kept below that 50 mile an hour threshold for most of the track into this area. I expect 30 to 50, maybe some gusts higher than that, which means that's going to come down to a discussion about how much rainfall we could get out of this rather than worrying about the winds in this particular area. Now, to put all this together, thinking about the tropical system, thinking about the moisture that's moving through this part of this very dry part of the upper Midwestern Corn Belt, let's just take a look at our top 16 inches of soil moisture in percentile. We do have multiple chances for bringing rainfall into this part of the Western Corn Belt. It will continue to be wet in Texas, where we do have saturated soils through this part of our Cotton Belt. And I do expect these values to come up here as we are putting down anywhere between 3 and maybe upwards of 5 or 6 inches of rain from Elsa. But the only place that's going to continue to see degradation in soil moisture is going to be in the Pacific Northwest and pockets of Montana and California, where we don't expect much precipitation at all. In fact, that might be best seen in this figure. What I did was with the European ensemble, I made a map here using Weatherbell's maps that show you the probability of getting less than 1/10 of an inch of rainfall. So you can see the probabilities down here. It's very, very just dry and hot underneath that ridge. And that's why I've been so concerned about the establishment of that ridge at the end of June and early July. Is it going to be a feature that almost remains unmovable as we progress forward in this forecast? Now from here, let's switch this over, and I'd like to now show you what the probability of getting more than an inch of rainfall is through the next 10 days. So hopefully it'll load there. And there we go. Sorry, the internet's just kind of slow as this rain's coming in today. So the European model is focused on this corridor right in through here as being the wettest. This is from Elsa. And then you see down here right along the Gulf Coast quite wet conditions. So let's use this as a backdrop to understand where this forecast is going. And I'm going to go right to this. Now, this particular product comes from a blend of models and also National Weather Service employee input. And so I call it the WPC Total Accumulated Precip Weather Prediction Center here. And what you notice is I put a few contours on this, and this contour I'm going right over right here is the 1.5 inches. So what we notice is there's a corridor coming over that ridge and then eventually into a stalled out front that brings in pretty heavy precipitation in through this area. This is Elsa, and in the near term there's an upper level low that's kind of trapped down here over southern Texas. But all in all, this might be the most important map I show you today explaining the next week's precipitation. Because while it does not extend up into the Red River Valley of the North, there's a substantial part of the Corn Belt that's going to be getting some rain. And it's going to be quite wet along the East Coast, and this kind of gathers into the Northeast. At the same time, the heat is on and the dryness continues. And while there is a hint of a southwestern monsoon, it is not yet as strong as we had earlier anticipated. So from there, I now want to show you the combination of the GFS in the European model. And I've been making this map for a while now, so let's take a look at what it shows. Remember, these colors down here represent where the GFS is the wetter model, and the colors up here represent where the European is the wetter model. Now, a couple of things you probably notice. The European is much wetter through, well, from the Dakotas through Michigan. The GFS is wetter farther to the south. See that? In terms of Elsa, the European has a much farther inland track than the GFS, which is along the coast. And I'll tell you this, the GFS has been the better performing model with Elsa. So I do expect the heavier rains to hug the coast right in through this area, where I'm expecting 2 to possibly some locations over 4 or 5 inches from Elsa. But throughout the Midwest, both models are wet, but it's the track that is substantially different. And they have different reasons for why they are. And I'd like to show you what's going on there by looking at a side-by-side comparison. So let's blow this up one time. There we go. So I'm going to use the 0Z runs today. And on the left, I have the GFS, and on the right, I have the European. If we just get this playing, we see that both models are bringing those rains through Minnesota and into northern Wisconsin, see this here, by this afternoon. All right, we were anticipating that. But you can see that there is a separation in the forecast once we get into the overnight hours tonight into Wednesday morning. Notice how much wetter the European is in Minnesota and Wisconsin. The boundary here is stronger. There's a little short even the upper levels of the atmosphere. It's just providing more lift than what the GFS is suggesting. The GFS is also much quicker at bringing in an overnight landfall here from Elsa, where if you notice farther to the south and still offshore is where the European is. So playing this forward into Wednesday afternoon and evening, notice European again, wetter through lower Michigan. slower with Elsa. Elsa's here on kind of the Florida-Georgia borderline here, whereas in the European, the main convection is already moving close to South Carolina. And that's going to be what the main differences are through Thursday morning, afternoon, and evening. I kind of did that fast, but look, through the central part of North Carolina, that's the heaviest rain from the European. The GFS already has this offshore in Virginia, but it brought the heaviest rains right here through this part of coastal Carolina. And the frontal boundary, sweeping through, cooling things off in the midwestern part of the United States, advances, and both models at this point do have a similar setup on where the precip is by Thursday. Let's keep going. As we get out here to Friday morning, afternoon, and evening, notice that both models bringing in precipitation into Iowa. That's pretty darn good agreement. And while still slower, they have Elsa in the same general position. Now, as we go from there into the weekend, here's Saturday morning, afternoon, and evening. Good agreement at this point. Do you see how the models are both stalling out right in through here, a frontal boundary? The European is wetter, farther to the south, and extends back here into this part of the plains. The GFS has got a flatter front that cuts right in through this area, which is why you saw it wetter in that previous comparison. Here's now Sunday morning, afternoon, and evening. Both models attempt to spin up a low pressure cell somewhere here on Iowa, Missouri, Illinois. See it right there? With the tail of the front farther to the south, cutting through parts of the Mid-South. I still like this. I have good agreement overall in what the models are suggesting here. As we let this play through the weekend, we now get out to next Monday, afternoon, and evening. And at that point, widely scattered storms over the southeast. The low curls up toward Michigan. It is there in the GFS, although I know the precip pattern looks different. But they're both keeping the Gulf open, so I do expect storms here. Could get some storms in the Canadian Prairie, a place that desperately needs it. But when you stitch all that together, remember that soil moisture map I showed you earlier? This is how I expect it to change as we progress forward. Now, this is coming from the European model, but it's the bigger idea that I want you to see. So we got this week out of the way. Take a look. Remember, when you look at this, a maximum value is 50%. That'd be saturated. So as we play this forward, there goes the rain throughout the day today through the upper Midwest. And then you'll see as I get into, there we go, this is through tomorrow midday, that rain spreads here into this part of Ontario and then to the northeast, and here comes the heavy rain from Elsa. Now, round 2 begins at the end of the week. See it coming through Iowa here on Friday, and then you'll notice, there it is, spreading out through Nebraska, parts of Missouri, getting into Illinois, Indiana. That's the rain that's coming through the end of this week and weekend. And what happens is that once you get out here toward early next week, let's just take it out there to Tuesday, we have really improved the soil moisture in places. Who misses out? Parts of the Red River Valley of the North. There could be a pocket right in through here that still needs more moisture in the soil to kind of survive, another week. So thinking about what that next week is going to hold, let's step up and take a look at the jet stream flow. Troughs are in blue, ridges are in red. Now to come back to what I discussed earlier, as I take you out here to this weekend, you see these troughs that are cutting through Alaska into the Gulf of Alaska really resist pushing into the Pacific Northwest and running across the United States. And that's because this ridge we talked about becoming established right here just keeps rebuilding at times across the western United States. So downstream of that, we get northwest flow. We get troughs coming through and wetter weather. But here along the west, it's going to be hot and it's going to be dry. So into Sunday and Monday, you see the downstream trough, you see the ridge over the Four Corner States, and even as I get into next week, and the GFS ensemble tries to put a trough in here, the net effect of the June ridging event that happened in the west is to keep the whole of the jet stream flow farther to the north. So it goes over the top of that ridge and cascades down like this, and bellies out in this trough right in through there. So we expect this area to show up wet. Let's keep going though. This is out to day 10. Let's go out there to day 11, 12, 13, and all the way out there. Let's stop at day 14. I still see that same ridge in place with northwest flow on this side of it. And when you get that type of pattern, this is what results in terms of precipitation. So we see that out at week 2 in the European model, we're wetter. There seems to be some sort of flow coming out of the southwestern monsoon, but it's not very far to the west. Notice that? And then right in through here, coming out of the upper Midwest, this is the best chances of rain that we've seen in the week 2 for a while. But right here through Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, this section, we do see quite a bit of precip. Does the GFS agree? Well, this is the latest update. Let's shrink that up a little bit. That's the latest update from the GFS. And we still see this area showing up wet, drier in the southeast, but the big difference is right here over the southern plains where the European model was wetter. So I like this model agreement overall. From here, let's now start to build this out by talking temperatures. We're just going to go straight into our max temperatures today on Tuesday. Watch the cold front advance from Tuesday into Wednesday and Thursday into the midsection of the country. The cloud cover from Elsa, cooling things down over here in the Carolinas. And we're still cool, a lot of cloud cover over Texas. Whereas the heat, it is west. And as we go into the weekend, watch Friday into Saturday, we're back up in the Columbia Basin into the triple digits. While the downstream effect is to see near normal summer temperatures on the 10th of July. And that just continues. As we go out here a little farther, this is into Sunday and Monday. Now we're going to get some 90s coming back into the upper Midwest and the northern plains, but it's not the excessive heat that we had seen. Day 5 through 10, what you're going to notice here is that same pattern seems to persist. Can't seem to break down the ridge over the western part of the United States, and there are no big global drivers suggesting that's going to happen, and I want to talk to you about those in a few moments. But first, updates here from the European Ensemble Weeklies. And what you notice here is that the temperature pattern that is shown here seems to resemble what I started off showing you, right? Let's even go back and find that real quick. There it is. This was the June through July 5th temperature pattern. And this is what we expect it to look like from the 16th of July through the 15th of August using the European weeklies. The heat tends to stay to the west. Next, let's talk about precip. You'll see here as this loads that is a very similar precipitation pattern that we've got coming in the next 2 weeks, just continuing. One good thing about it is the models have backed off on the overly dry conditions that were posted here earlier in runs. I see a weakening of the southwestern monsoon, though, in the European. Notice that? But very wet from Texas through the Ohio River Valley into the northeast. At this point, I don't see a lot of tropical cyclones forming right now through the next 10 days, after Elsa, of course, but we need to keep an eye on how that could shift with time. So from there, let's talk about the big drivers. You're going to notice that the extended forecast from July the 5th through August the 5th from the European model of the MJO is keeping it tucked right into this area over the Indian Ocean. To be honest, that's kind of expected right now because the Indian Ocean monsoon is cranking up. But what I don't see is the MJO popping out and running around the graphic at this point, which would tell me that the MJO would be a more dominant factor. So why I bring that up is to show you this graphic. What you're going to notice is that throughout the next 5 days, the best upward motion is here in the Indian Ocean with a lot of subsidence in this section of our planet, while there's also good rising motion over Africa. Now, over Africa is where I want to watch most carefully with respect to tropical cyclones. So for example, if I go out there about 30 days or maybe 35 days, we start to see that toward the end of July and beginning of August, the models are hinting at, well, those negative velocity potentials. And what that means is better rising motion in this area, which could produce those easterly waves that then run over here and become tropical cyclones as they approach North America. So please just keep an eye on this with me. I'll keep bringing it up so we can reinforce the science behind it and keep an eye on it together. But from there, I want to show you some other things that are changing, and this will help guide our long-range forecast. So first, ocean temperatures. We're still cool in here, and it's cool down in the South Pacific as well. But this warm water here is short-lived. Don't expect that to hang around. The reason why I say that is because the new data from the European model is now turning almost all of its ensemble members back down toward about negative half or 3/4 of a degree Celsius in Nino region 3.4. And just as a reminder, that region is essentially right in through here. It's maybe a little bit too big of a box, but that's what we're talking about. And what this means is, like we talked about earlier, there's a chance for kind of a double dip here on our La Nina. such that getting through fall in toward early winter, we could go back into a La Nina situation. Now, what does that all mean? To answer that, I want to show you what the ocean temperatures might look like by November, December, January. Cooler on the coast and then cool right here on the equator. And as we progress toward that, look at what this might do. This is key information here. Let's go into North America. There we go. Let's go to North America here and look at what this might do to the precipitation patterns for the start of the next water year for the West. Remember, it's their dry season. You start to see better chances of returning moisture to the Pacific Northwest, which, as I started with, is record dry. That La Nina is not the most favorable thing for California, and I'm going to have to watch this carefully to see if this is the scenario shaping up here. But what I want to do is, we went way ahead in the forecast. Let's come back to what the current August, September, and October forecast looks like. Now, what's interesting about this is the driest conditions are forecast to be in the plains. But it's not, well, it's just a shade or two on this side of the drier anomalies. You also notice that the models are trying to push quite a bit of moisture into, British Columbia, but wetter extensions down here into Northern California. Now that is an interesting setup, and it is not echoed in the CFSV2. This would suggest putting a ridge in the midsection of the country. And I'm going to have to watch that carefully, because that would be a break from persistence, what we've had as of late. The ridges have been all out west. So let's watch that carefully. What do the temperatures do? Well, they follow that idea of moving a late summer ridge into the midsection of the country. You see that the seasonal temperature anomalies for August, September, October are highest here. So we need to keep a very, very close eye on these things moving forward. And we'll see the trends in the model as we progress forward. All right. From there, I'm going to give you a very quick international update. I'm going to take you first to Europe. Over the next 10 days, the weekend trends in the European ensemble have favored very heavy rains coming out of parts of France into southern Germany, getting into Poland. This area and through here could experience a lot of flooding. What that has effectively done is, for the first time in a while, brought in not only very dry conditions into Ukraine, but also hot. Now, if there's a place in Ukraine that I've noticed has been drier than normal, it's been the northern and western parts of Ukraine. We've been much wetter closer to the Black Sea. Parts of the Russian wheat belt have been dry as well. But in addition to these dry conditions, over the next 10 days, we are expecting very hot conditions. This might start to creep up as something we need to be paying close attention to coming out of the Black Sea region. Watch that with me, okay? And finally, just want to show you some incredible satellite imagery here. You are in Siberia, if you're looking right over here, and the wildfire smoke in Siberia is just incredibly widespread and very thick. And I want to show you these latest satellite updates just so you can get an idea of how much of the forest there is burning at this time. Okay, I appreciate you allowing me just to do one video today. My internet is really kind of sketchy here, but I'll return home next week and we'll get right back on our normal schedule. Thank you so much, and I'll talk to you again very soon.